you seen, and do you have any plans to do anything about this? How have you seen kind of this woke culture infiltrate the church?
Oh gosh, this is the worst. So this is what I'm fighting against on a daily basis. You're more likely in this country to hear a sermon in a church about climate change, the so-called climate crisis, or about Black Lives Matter, or about Brexit than you are about Jesus Christ. That, to me, is sad. If I'm being charitable, I'll say that these people are well-intentioned and they're doing what they think is best. If I'm feeling less charitable and more cynical, I'll say they've actually lost the faith or they've found a new religion. I think a lot of people at this point are worshipping the environment. And of course, we are stewards of the world. We should protect it and look after it, but we shouldn't worship it. It's become an icon. It's become an idol, sorry. So that's one way it's infesting the church. But also, I'm fighting against this critical race theory nonsense in every element of my life. I started out, the reason I'm a political commentator is because I was writing about critical race theory infesting education while I was teaching, but it's infesting the church too. There was a priest recently, who I won't mention by name, tweeted something about there's a very good Englishman called Sir Captain Tom Moore, who during the first lockdown, he's like in his 90s, late 90s, he went on walks around the country raising money for the NHS, for the National Health Service. Very good thing. He raised over £33 million. It was fantastic.
Wow. We
were all applauding him. Great guy. But this priest put out a tweet saying, celebrating him is celebrating the cult of white supremacy. I'm like, that's hatred. You're no longer preaching love. This is a faith of love. You are literally preaching hatred because you don't like white people. And that's essentially what this critical race theory stuff is about. Diversity just means removal of white people, essentially. And so I looked into what this priest was saying. He's saying things like, the bread that we receive in the Eucharist is white. That's racist. The Bible mentions whiteness as cleanliness and purity. That's racist. Jesus is not white people painting him as white, that's racist. And people like this priest, I use him as an example, that people like him see racism everywhere, but in order to solve it, they become racist themselves and they perpetuate it and they spread the hate. But what's happening is the church is supporting this and say, oh, that's very good, this brown person said that, they must be right. And whether they believe it or not, they didn't challenge it, so people go along with it. But other people think it's fantastic and say, yes, we must eradicate this whiteness. And then the church itself, the Church of England, put out, well, first of all, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the chief primate of the Church of England, said a statement at General Synod saying, the church is institutionally racist. And I have massive problems when anyone makes a broad claim like that without any evidence to back it up, because of course there are elements of racism everywhere in our society. There are racist people everywhere, but that doesn't make an institution racist unless there are barriers and hurdles put up that would prevent ethnic minorities getting into the institution, or holding them down or oppressing them in some way. And I've not seen any evidence of that structurally. Institutionally. But he put out that statement, and then the church put out a report called Lament to Action that backs that up and said the church is institutionally racist. We need to look at our colonial past, and everything these days is about the British Empire, how bad it was. And they forget that the British Empire, definitely had some bad elements in it, but also ended or was instrumental in ending slavery on a global scale. The British Navy, we only recently stopped paying for the cost of ending slavery on an international scale. The British Empire spread Christianity around the world, the English language around the world, built hospitals, railways, schools, charities all around the world. It did a lot of good, as well as the bad that it did, and that's never addressed. But the church is saying, hey, we have terrible ties to this British past. We must be ashamed of ourselves. And then they put out a report saying that the country is institutionally racist. And I have massive problems with that, because I think this is one of the best countries in the world to live, which is why I still live here. I did spend a bit of time in America, but I missed Great Britain. And I think, a lot of people are risking their lives to come and live here. They're crossing the borders, international borders, illegally to come and live here because it's so great. I think it's wrong for anyone to stand up and say this country is racist without proving it or backing it up with any evidence, because everyone just nods and goes, yeah, of course it is, because that's the right thing to say. And as a result of that, the church is basically performing what they call positive discrimination or positive action, which is just discrimination, this affirmative action idea that we must elect more Black people onto church leadership bodies, whether not electing, what's the word when you just put someone on without an election? It'll come to me later. But this idea that black, and it's always black people. It's never ethnic minorities in general. It's always, for some reason, it's more fashionable to patronize the black demographic. But we must put more black people on these bodies. So if no matter where you are in the country, there must be 30% black people. And this is a country where, in London, for example, there are quite a lot of ethnic minority people, myself included. But in other parts of the country, like places where I came from, you would struggle to find even 3%. And 3% of this country is black. About 15% is ethnic minority. So you cannot get 30% black people on everybody. These things are arbitrary and made up. And they're people thinking they're doing good. And what they're doing is actually causing more harm. They're stoking racial tensions and causing division, where often they didn't exist to begin with.
How much of this is just coming straight from America, especially that 30%? Like that is like... Just all of it?
All of it. This is the problem. The biggest problem with Great Britain is America. For some reason, we just copy every cultural fad that happens over there, like 3 months later. I don't know why. The whole Black Lives Matter movement was massive over here for a poor chap that died in a different country. And we don't have the same race divide that America has over here. My parents moved over here. So my father's parents moved over here in the 1950s. There was quite a bit of racism, but there was no racial segregation. We didn't have to have a fight for emancipation. We've got equality under the law, and we've had it for decades. Very, very different picture to what's going on in America. And police brutality issues, all that stuff is very, very different over there. So I don't know why we import the drama and say, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter. Well, I mean, of course, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Why do Black Lives matter any more than any other life? And why don't Asian lives matter? I don't understand it. I don't get why we're copy and pasting drama from another country.